People use racism as a means to get what they want at different times.
Welcome to the Global Indian Podcast, the world's greatest journey and the official platform for people of Indian origin. Because let's face it, we are everywhere. Welcome back to The Voyage. This is Season 2, Episode 1 of a three-part special with an incredible individual, Ela Gandhi. This podcast is hosted by our Global Indian Ambassador for South Africa, Rajesh Gopie. It has been also supported by our dear friends at ShareMe.com, the app for all your beauty, fitness, and wellness needs. So let me introduce myself to those new to the podcast. My name is Rajan Nazran, and I explore. For over a decade, I've traveled the world, piecing together the kaleidoscope that is our community. I've been held hostage, faced Ebola, and met extraordinary individuals, often in destinations that would surprise you. In this season, I'm joined by my dear friends around the globe as we take you on a voyage for the ears as we plunge into the human experience of being a person of Indian origin and take a closer look at the countries we now call home. And importantly, we also look at the conversations that you need to hear. This three-part special is a conversation with an incredible individual who in fact turns 80 on the day we publish this podcast. It's an ode to a remarkable life so far, a person whose family is steeped in the freedom struggle of both India and South Africa. And in this three-part special, we discuss everything from racism, politics, and the changing face of India, and the remarkable life of Ela Gandhi, a person who has lived many lives within one and has continued the legacy of her grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi. You can find out more about the Global Indian series at the end of this podcast. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button on the Ela Gandhi playlist. And if you listen to this podcast via Podbeam, as long as you subscribe, the next episode will load up. You are going to love this three-part special. I hope you enjoy these sessions. Take care for now.
Get up and just move. 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 Get up and just.
We're talking with freedom fighter, social activist, parliamentarian, author, academic, recipient of the Padma Bhushan from the Indian government in 2007, the recipient of the Pravasi Bharatiya Samman, the highest honor to an overseas Indian in 2014, a veteran of the Mkontwe Sizwe movement in South Africa, which is the armed wing of the African National Congress, and most interestingly, the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi. We're speaking today with Ela Gandhi from Durban, South Africa. Namaste, Ela Ben.
Namaste.
Ela Ben, welcome and thank you for speaking with us on the Global Indian Experience, together with Rajan, who's listening in and will be involved. So, Ela Ben, let's kick it off with a question about your dad, whose name was Manilal, the second son of Gandhi. And not too many people know that Gandhi had four sons, Harilal, Manilal being your dad, then Ramdas, and the youngest being Devdas. But your dad remained in South Africa after Gandhiji left. Would you take us back to those days when your dad, the memories your dad left for you in terms of his life here?
Okay, just to say that when Gandhiji left South Africa in 1914, he took his entire family with him. And my father, together with his brothers, went to Shantiniketan, the school that Rabindranath Tagore had started in India. So they stayed there for a while, about a year or so, and then he went on to a school started by the Ramakrishna Center in India. And when he was around 20 something, he was asked by my grandfather to return to South Africa because there was a request from South Africa to come and assist with a newspaper and running of the Phoenix settlement. So just to historically state that when my grandfather left South Africa in 1914, he left behind a number of properties. There were two properties that were left for the NIC, the Natal Indian Congress, to continue their work and, to have some sort of security for their work and, the progress that the movement made, the movement for freedom in South Africa. So two properties in Durban were left to NIC. And there was one property in Inanda which was left under a trust. A trust was created of a number of people who believed in the ideologies of Tolstoy, Ruskin, and Gandhian philosophy of working for the people, working on the land, being self-sufficient, and so on. And so Phoenix settlement was very active at the time. There was also Tolstoy farm in Johannesburg, but that Tolstoy farm belonged to Mr. Kallenbach. And after 1910, when Gandhiji left Tolstoy farm and came back to Phoenix settlement, Tolstoy farm was, people moved out of Tolstoy farm, and then it was left with nobody over there. Whereas Phoenix settlement had a community living on Phoenix settlement. Besides having a community, Phoenix settlement also had a newspaper, the Indian Opinion, which Gandhiji had started, and which continued in South Africa right until 1962. So my father was sent back to run the Phoenix settlement as well as the newspaper and to participate in the freedom struggle in South Africa. So this is what my father did in a nutshell. And we were brought up under those conditions, living at Phoenix, which was a rural community with very little facilities, no running water, no electricity, and so on, in simple conditions on a farm, being self-sufficient, living under those conditions there, and, under Gandhian ideals. And our life sort of revolved around the newspaper, the Phoenix settlement, and the liberation struggle. So those were the three important kind of narratives in the life of my father, my family, and Phoenix settlement.
Ilapen, let me ask the question, the elephant in the room. Your grandfather, I mean, it's lovely to hear you speak my grandfather, but to the rest of the world, it's Mahatma Gandhiji, the great freedom fighter. I don't know if you ever met him, because I think you were about 7 when he passed on, when he was assassinated?
Right, yes. So my family went to India in around 1946 for about a year. It was like a sabbatical. The newspaper Phoenix settlement and all the activities were left to the trustees of the Phoenix settlement. And my father and our family went to India, and we stayed there for almost a year. So it was towards the end of 1946, we stayed there. until almost the end, around October 1947, that we returned. And in 1948, January, he was assassinated. So I had the privilege of staying for about 3 months in his ashram at Sevagram. And afterwards, for about a month or so, in Pune at Nature Cure Institute, where my mother had gone for some treatment. And my grandfather was there also for a while. And so we lived there for about just 3 weeks to a month. So those were the only times that I spent with my grandfather. But even though I was just 6 years old, those memories are very much alive in my mind. And I really cherish them because I remember him to be a very loving, very devoted grandfather. He gave us time every day in his busy schedule. And if you remember, those 1947 was a crucial period in India, a time when the riots were taking place, a time when he was, engrossed in a number of things, the transition in India, and there was a lot of, instability. And through that time, I didn't get the feeling that there was something worrying him. He gave us his time and his attention fully. So it was really a nice experience for me to have had during that time. Had we not gone then to India, I might not have ever seen him.
Wow, that's just amazing. Oh, I mean, right now I'm holding in my hand a copy, the story of my experiments with truth, which I picked up in an airport on my last trip to India. And honestly, I've been reading it and I never thought I'd enjoy it as much as I am right now. So you speaking about this is amazing. If I could push you for one particular memory, one very personal memory, very visceral memory of you and Gandhiji that you can share, that would be great.
Well, there are lots of anecdotes about me and Bapuji, my grandfather. There was a time when I asked him, did people call you Bapuji when you were a child? And he said, no, everybody used to call me Mohanyo. And then I said, so can I call you Mohanyo? And he said, yes, of course you can. And so I used to playfully call him Mohanyo at that time. So that was the one story. Then living in Sevagram Ashram, we used to have pumpkin. Every day they used to cook pumpkin. And for lunch and supper, it was pumpkin. So one day I sat with my grandfather and I said, you know what? You should call the Sevagram Ashram Kolagram. And he said, why Kolagram? Now, Kolu means pumpkin. So Gram is the land of pumpkin, So he said, so why are you saying that? And I said to him, well, every day we eat pumpkin over here. So there's more pumpkins here than anything else. And he took that very seriously. He went to the evening prayers and he told everyone that, look, when I talk about simplicity, simplicity is not boring. You don't have to cook, pumpkin every day. You can have variety. You need to grow other vegetables and eat them. Why are you cooking pumpkin every day? And so he gave them a long lecture about pumpkins. And of course, I was very unpopular after that because, I had carried tails. And but it was just a simple childish thing. But it gave me a very strong message, and I think that message is, very, very important for the young people today who think that Gandhiji was boring. He was far from boring. He said simple life, but very enjoyable. You can enjoy the nature, you can enjoy walks, you can enjoy lots of things around you and still be simple and still not be spending millions of rands. So enjoyment is not bought with money. You can enjoy life just without any money.
That's extremely profound because right now we're in this lockdown period and we're certainly learning the whole idea or relearning the ideas, new ideas around money and around living and around simplicity. I'm sure Rajan and myself, I know I can speak about this, is that we completely living differently from how we lived 2 months ago. I don't know how you feel about that, Rajan, but that's really interesting that you should say that because right now we're in the middle of the lockdown. And that is the way that you lived in the Gandhi ashram, in the Phoenix ashram. In Inanda, there was a lot of that simplicity. And that spread out into the community around you, which was a largely poor community. So if we could jump ahead to Phoenix and some of your life there, especially that of your mother and the school, the multiracial school, one of the first multiracial schools that happened.
Yes, so the house that my grandfather lived in was a very, very simple house. It was a wooden iron house. And Phoenix settlement is sort of infested with borers or white ants. And so by 1940, 45 or so, borers had begun eating up all the wood in that house. And so we had to think of a new house for ourselves. And well, my father couldn't do anything on his own because the whole land belonged to trustees, not to us as a family. And I think that it's very important that we should remember that Gandhiji never left anything for his family. All his possessions, and there were very few, he left to the community. So Phoenix settlement was also under a trust, and the ownership of Phoenix settlement has always been under a trust, even up to this date. There's a trust that owns Phoenix, not the family. And
Right.
so it was the trust decision that we should build a house and that we should build it ourselves by building each block for the house. And, later on in South Africa, people started using blocks. But in 1940, my father already started this, and it was started by Mr. Callenbeck, who was an architect and a builder. And he was, the person who started this idea of building your own blocks. As a child of 5, 6-year-old, I can remember making the blocks, having sand and cement and concrete, mixing it together, ourselves with a spade. We didn't have any machines on the settlement. We had to do it ourselves. And we did that, and it was fun. We built each block at a time, and it took us a whole year and a half before the house was built. But each one of those blocks in the house was built by us. That's the whole family together and some of the neighbors and so on Phoenix Settlement. There was a whole community at Phoenix Settlement at the time, and we all got together and built those blocks ourselves.
Yellowpen, this was a multiracial community, right?
Sorry?
This was a multiracial community, right?
Yes, it was, although largely Indian. Unfortunately, we had African people living in the neighboring communities, like, the Dubé farm, the Shembe farm, and we had very a new farm where many Africans lived. We had very many friends in the neighborhood and of all race groups. But on the settlement itself, we had just, I think, one African family, and all the rest were Indian families.
And what was that like? That sort of, you know, in terms of how South Africa was, that was quite a really good situation in terms of multiracial living, because we know that didn't really exist in other places. And the country by 1945, 46, 47, 48, when the Nats took over, they were certainly putting a stop to that kind of communal living, especially across the race line.
That's right, yeah. In fact, even before the Nats took over, my grandfather had to, in the trust deed, say that it was mainly for Indian people. He couldn't include African people because then that trust wouldn't be registered by the government, because they had laws to say that you can't live together. And the area, the Inanda area, was called Released Area number 33 because it was one of those areas where people could live together. There weren't
Right.
many areas like that which were not declared for a particular race group. So yes, Phoenix Settlement was unique in that respect. And we were very fortunate in the sense that when we came to Phoenix, we could experience the freedom in the country, the freedom to play with anyone we chose, the freedom to communicate and live with anyone. Many African people came and lived in our home. Griffiths Mkenge, for instance, lived in our house. Steve Biko lived at Phoenix Settlement.
Wow.
Many other African, white, colored people came and lived in our houses, in our home.
And
When my father was alive, and later on when with my mom and our family. So I lived there right until 1978.
so it's really interesting how that shaped your life, given how your life turned out as a social worker and an activist. But I'm gonna fast track you to 1985, when the Phoenix ashram was destroyed, partially or to some extent seriously damaged by the riots that took place. Now these were, people label it a lot of things, but it was largely Black on Indian riots that happened in 1985, and people like
Talk about a cliffhanger. I mean, that is Rajesh Gopie for you. So, if you like that episode, I suggest, and I strongly suggest, you need to listen to part two. Part two, Ela Gandhi goes into more details about what happened in 1985 and actually looks a lot deeper into some of the big issues facing South Africa as a whole. Again, as promised at the beginning, you can find out more about the Global Indian series by visiting us on our social media platforms. If it's on Instagram, you can find us at the Nazrans, which is my personal account. There you can reach out, touch base with us, and tell us a bit about your stories and your experiences, and also maybe ways in which you'd like to get involved with the series. If you're on YouTube, all you have to do is type in Global Indian Series and you'll find all the series podcasts so far. As suggested at the beginning, It is a 3-part special, so make sure you subscribe via Podbean or via YouTube under the Ela Gandhi playlist. That way you can listen to all 3 episodes easily and effortlessly, and it also ensures that you don't miss an episode. These are some incredible conversations. Now, the next episode will be starting as soon as they hit the next track. Until you hear my voice again, I hope all remains well. Bye for now.